You're watching The Legal Breakdown. Glenn, we've got a brand new update as far as the unsealing of grand jury testimony in the Epstein case is concerned. Can you explain what just happened in court?
Brian, it's a clean sweep. A third federal court judge just denied Pam Bondi and DOJ's motion, seeking to have the grand jury transcripts in the Epstein case unsealed so that the public can see what's in there. So there were three motions filed by the Department of Justice, one in Florida, seeking to have Epstein grand jury materials down there unsealed. The judge said, no, you don't have a legal basis. And two filed in New York, one to unseal the Ghislaine Maxwell grand jury transcripts. A judge previously ruled, no, you don't have a legal basis. And today it is the hat trick. It's a clean sweep with Judge Richard Berman, who is a federal judge with the Southern District of New York, really taking the DOJ and Pam Bondi to task. Again, rejecting the motion, saying you don't provide a legal basis for the unsealing of this transcript. But what's far more important than the ruling, Brian, is what the judge said about what DOJ is really trying to get away with here. And let me read for our viewers just a couple of sentences from this brand new 14-page judicial order and ruling. Judge Berman says, a significant and compelling reason to reject the government's, that is the Department of Justice's, request is that DOJ has already undertaken a comprehensive investigation into the Epstein case and, not surprisingly, has assembled a trove of Epstein documents, interviews, and exhibits, and the DOJ committed that it would share its Epstein investigation materials with the public. The judge notes that the government, the DOJ, has more than 100,000 pages of Epstein files, and he notes those materials dwarf the 70 pages of grand jury transcripts that consist of the testimony, Brian. Here's where we see the bait and switch going on. The testimony of one FBI agent with no firsthand knowledge who offers hearsay to the grand jury. Hearsay is basically the FBI agent saying, well, one of the witnesses said this. Well, one of the victims said that. That is really worthless evidence. So it's important to note that there was not a single witness, there was not a single victim who testified before the grand jury when Bill Barr's Department of Justice was seeking an indictment of Jeffrey Epstein and then of Ghislaine Maxwell. And here's where the judge sums it up. The government, the DOJ, is the logical party to make comprehensive disclosure to the public of the Epstein files. By comparison, the instant grand jury motion to unseal appears to be a, quote, diversion from the breadth and scope of the Epstein files in DOJ's possession. To sum that up, this judge calls out the Department of Justice and Pam Bondi as trying to basically put a smoke screen out there, a diversion, because there's nothing of consequence in the grand jury files. However, Pam Bondi has the absolute authority to release the Epstein files, 100,000 pages strong, and fully inform the public of what's in there. And after promising to do it early on, of course, they changed course recently and said, yeah, you know what, we're not releasing anything. And then they tried to divert the public's attention by saying, but we're going to try to get a judge to order the release of the grand jury transcripts. This is nothing more than a reality show gone bad.
Right, and knowing full well that the judges don't have the authority or the legal basis to be able to do that, so that they can point to them and say, we wanted to release them, we tried our hardest, we went to the judges. It's those communist, Marxist, leftist judges who are definitely hiding something to protect some of their Democrat friends who refuse to release these files. Again, they knew from the very beginning. We talked about 6E secrecy rules that prevent these judges from being able to disclose this stuff. Not like Pam Bondi doesn't know that. So they did this whole charade knowing full well that they wouldn't get the release from these judges, which even if they did, by the way, it's like 5% of what's included in the full file. And that stuff only pertains to the convictions of Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein. So it wouldn't even release the information that we want to get released, which is the information on the other clients. All of these, there was as many as 1,000 people who were involved in this scheme. So the whole thing, to your exact point, is a smokescreen, which I guess raises this question: how unorthodox is it for these judges then to be the ones kind of calling this charade out? Because generally I would think of the judges just kind of ruling on the issue right in front of them, which is, can we release these grand jury testimonies, or can we not release these grand jury testimonies, and kind of rule on that case in a vacuum. But the reality is they're kind of pointing out the full game here, and what the Trump administration is trying to do by roping them into this whole thing. How unorthodox is it for the judges to kind of call that out?
Brian, that's the perfect question, because as you say, the judges are exposing the shell game, the diversion that DOJ is engaged in right now. Is it unusual? You bet it's unusual. Is it improper? Hell no. And here's why. Because the Department of Justice usually is on the side of we the people, of the rule of law, of the Constitution, and of the victims of these horrific sex crimes, but not Pam Bondi's Department of Justice. She is in it to protect Donald Trump and do whatever dear leader says. So, I would be disappointed and perhaps angry if the judges didn't actually inform the public what's going on. And one of the prior judges put in her ruling that, look, there is nothing new that the public doesn't already know in the paltry little grand jury transcript that DOJ is trying to get unsealed. So judge after judge is exposing the Department of Justice as playing games designed to actually hide the Epstein files from the American people.
Glenn, just for posterity here, can you talk about what it is that prevents these judges from releasing these files? Because obviously, as I mentioned before, the Trump administration is relying on the fact that these judges can't release these testimonies so that they can point at them and say, look, we want to be transparent here. It's not our fault. It's these judges. We're trying as hard as we can. It's the judges who are hiding something here. So can you explain what the con is that these Republicans are trying to perpetuate by virtue of putting this in front of judges, knowing full well that they can't release them, that they don't have the authority to release them?
Yeah, Brian, here's the con. The law provides, as is implemented in Federal Rule of Criminal Procedure 6E, for anybody scoring at home, that grand jury materials are secret. They are protected by law. Why? Because we want witnesses and victims of crime to have confidence that if they talk about these horrific and traumatic things they either experienced as victims or saw as witnesses, they will be protected. Their identity will be protected. They will not be outed. You know why? Because if the bad guys or the bad girls get wind that somebody is giving them up in the grand jury, snitching, as they say, in the street, that can be very dangerous for witnesses and victims. So we go to great lengths to protect the secrecy of grand jury testimony, materials, and transcripts. And the law says, as embodied and implemented in Rule 6E, there are only very limited circumstances where a judge can order the release of those materials. Let me give you the one that is by far the most common exception to grand jury secrecy. If I'm prosecuting, let's say, a killer in Washington, D.C., and that person is also being prosecuted or criminally investigated by my colleagues, the prosecutors across district lines up in Maryland or across the river in Virginia, I would go to the judge and seek an order allowing me to release my grand jury information, evidence, and transcripts to those other prosecutors for a law enforcement purpose, so they would be able to fully investigate the crimes that were committed in their jurisdictions. That is actually in furtherance of law enforcement efforts. There is also a terrorism exception. There's actually a bank fraud exception. There's no exception for, you know what? The public is really interested in this stuff. Now, some appellate courts have said, you know what? If it is such a searing public interest and it's a case that is 50 or 100 years old, the Rosenberg spy case, for example, I think they had some grand jury transcripts ultimately unsealed and made public in that matter. Maybe there is the authority in the judge to order the release, even though it's not an exception in the rule or the law. But, it almost never happens. And the judges in all three motions to unseal easily rejected DOJ and Pam Bondi's claim that, we think the public interest here outweighs everything else. And Judge, just go ahead and unseal them, particularly, Brian, when they're seeking the unsealing of something that really will not inform the public. What will inform the public is the more than 100,000 pages worth of Epstein files that DOJ has the authority to release anytime they choose, and they are choosing to secrete it, to conceal it.
So let's talk about that to finish up here. Just this idea, your reaction to the con more broadly about how the Trump administration is kind of bait and switching all of their own supporters, given the fact that they were the ones out here promising during the campaign to release these Epstein files, and now they have used every trick in the book, not just to refuse to release these files, but to purposefully manipulate their own supporters into thinking that they somehow don't have the authority that they clearly have the authority to do. I mean, there were videos of Kash Patel talking about how the FBI director has the authority to release the files. Dude is the FBI director right the fuck now, and he isn't releasing the files. You have Dan Bongino, who talks about how the deep state was secreting these files so that we all wouldn't see them. He's the deputy director of the FBI. He's not releasing the files. You have Pam Bondi, who had come forward and said that the files were on her desk. Those files suddenly vanished into thin air, and she suddenly has no authority to release them. You have Trump himself, you have Don Jr., you have all these Republicans who were demanding that these files get released until the moment they had the opportunity to do so. Then we find out that Trump himself is in the files, and now the whole federal government is involved in this top-to-bottom cover-up where we apparently have 1,000 FBI agents who are involved in figuring out where Donald Trump's name is revealed in the Epstein files and having that blacked out so that nobody can see it. So can I just get your general reaction to the bait and switch that his supporters have gotten now that it's gone from expose these criminals to cover up on behalf of the criminals?
Brian, this is a cover up on an almost unimaginably massive scale. You just said it is an all of federal government cover up. I wouldn't say all, but damn near all. I think the Democrats in Congress would very much like for the Epstein files to be made public. You know what? Even if there is a Democrat or two in there, it doesn't really matter whether you carry an R after your name or a D or an I after your name. If you're involved in, sexual abuse of children, of young girls, well, then everybody ought to be held to account. And the Democrats have been clamoring for the release of it. But, it takes me back to Richard Nixon and Watergate, right? If the crime won't get you, the cover-up will. This is just a massive cover-up going on in plain sight. Even judges are calling, this Judge Berman, quoted Pam Bondi as saying she said she was going to release the files. I mean,
yeah.
If this cover-up doesn't sort of resonate and doesn't continue to have legs and doesn't come home to roost when even Donald Trump's own supporters, who Donald Trump says are weaklings because they're still interested in what's in the Epstein files. Further, Donald Trump's Republican allies in Congress, who Donald Trump says are, quote, foolish and stupid for continuing to talk about the Epstein files. If this cover-up doesn't come home to roost, then, I don't know what kind of hope we have for the future of our government or, frankly, our democracy.
Well, look, this is obviously not the last we're going to hear of the Epstein files. For everybody who's watching right now, if you'd like to stay on top of this stuff and support our work, completely free to do so. Please subscribe to our YouTube channels. I'm going to put the links right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. Again, it doesn't cost anything to subscribe. It's a great way to support our work and a great way to support independent media more broadly, especially given the fact that, a lot of these issues that are plaguing this country right now, legacy media is not meeting the moment with the urgency that it deserves. And so we try to do what legacy media won't. We try to actually bring issues forward that deserve to be talked about, not just both sidesism like we've seen for so long. So again, we'll put the links right here on the screen and also in the post description. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
And I'm Glenn Kirshner.
You're watching The Legal Breakdown.